I'm really excited to be here talking about this subject that is close to my heart and I think really fascinating in a couple of ways and really relevant for now. We are heading back to 1751 to Gloucester in the British colony of Massachusetts. We are right on the ocean and, of course, a couple of years before the revolution. Pretty exciting slash unsettling place to be living. And a baby girl has just been born. Her name is Judith Sargent. And I want to show you her because she is fabulous. Quite a remarkable woman and just incredible clothes that I'm very jealous of there. But Judith Sargent will grow up to be one of the key and first feminist writers in American history. But at this point, she is one of 9 children. Only 4 of them survived, so pretty standard for this time and place. She is the only girl. Her education is unusually thorough for a girl in this time and place. She is reading everything that she can find, all of the books in the house, all of the books in her community. That's a lot. She is in quite an educated and a house that values education. She's learning everything she can. She's grabbing all the knowledge she can find. She is clearly a brilliant, brilliant child, but she's a girl. So while her brothers go on to Harvard, she does not. Even though she is the one who tutored her brother Fitzwilliam and got him into Harvard, she is not going. Her parents don't see any reason why a girl would be pursuing that kind of an education. You wouldn't need it. Your job is to get married and make as many children as possible. And she writes that from the moment she can remember as a child, she was always having to fight, even within her own family, for her rights, for her place, for her education from childhood. And this beginning made a huge impression on her. She knew this was unfair. She could see this was arbitrary. It had nothing to do with the aptitude or the skills or the interest. She is more able to do this work than her brother, but he's there and she's not. And as she grows up, she becomes increasingly upset about this and increasingly determined that she is going to do anything she can to change that, that might in any way change that for more girls and women in the future. So she grows up in the established Congregational church there, but in the 1770s, Judith and her siblings and her parents all convert to this brand new weird thing called Universalism. And her family is incredibly influential in this. They helped to fund and create the very first Universalist church. They fund bringing over a pastor called John Murray as the first Universalist minister in the American colony. And here they fund and build this church, which still stands in Gloucester, and it was the first Universalist church in the Americas, and it's still there. This is this tower here, and is still there functioning as a church and as a community center. And so they are on the cutting edge of this new weird religion. And one of the big draws for Judith especially was the Universalist view on women, that all sexes are equal, that everyone is equal in the eyes of God, that race, class, sex, none of this matters. And her father is really drawn in by the sort of revolutionary equality aspect, right? This is pre-revolutionary America. All men are created equal, emphasis on the men for her father. But for Judith, this gender equity is the big draw here. And in the face of a pretty strong Calvinist view, an angry God who has already decided what your life is going to look like, given that that's how Judith's life has played out so far, she has been predetermined what she is allowed to do. She is pushing hard against that. And this big open space of God loves us and wants us to be happy and do what we want is pretty compelling for her. But of course, she's still a girl. And at 18, she marries John Stevens, who is a merchant sailor like her father. He's a social equal. It's a good family. This is a good marriage. She's happy as she can be with it. And it's everything that is expected of her life. Her job, as I mentioned, her entire job is to make babies, as many babies as possible. And even though that's what's expected of her, she is also really, that's what she wants. She wants children. She really, really, really wants to be a mother. And years go by and years go by and years go by, and she is not having children. And it's starting to become noticed, right, in her community. And it's not happening. They eventually adopt and raise two of her husband's nieces, but this is pretty mortifying for her publicly, and also just really heartbreaking for her. This is what she wanted, and it's not happening. But of course, in 1775, the revolution is kicking off. Gloucester is the center of all of this. Right after Lexington and Concord comes Gloucester. Her parents' house and her neighborhood is getting bombarded by the British ships for about a year, just constantly. The whole city is under attack. It's a fishing village, and they can't fish because of the British ships. So it's really a difficult time. They're right in the center of it, but she and her husband start buying up land to build a house. By 1781, good timing, the house is finished. The war is over. They move in. And because she doesn't have children, Judith has some time to do other things. So she starts writing. And pretty quickly, she publishes the first Universalist children's catechism ever published in the now brand new United States. She is the first Universalist woman to publish in the American colonies, the US. And again, this is brand new, cutting edge. She's creating the first core curriculum for American Universalist children. This is really bold, and she knows it. She is a woman asserting herself as an expert, someone who is expert enough in this religious education knowledge to write official materials. This is really important for her. And she is actively working in universalism in ways that are shocking to the society around her, and really even unusual within Universalist communities. She is out teaching, traveling. She goes to Philadelphia for 6 months, and she is there with Pastor John Murray. She's attending a Universalist convention. She meets George Washington. She attends sessions of Congress. She is mixing with all of the big players, and she is really interested in the world around her. She's refusing to be kept in the kitchen and out of the world, and she is inserting herself into the conversation anywhere she can. Now, this could have easily not gone over well with her husband, but John Stevens was super proud of this catechism. He was super proud of her work. He even bought 100 copies himself and gave them out to everybody he knew. He was just so delighted that she was doing this work. So she's happy, she's writing, she's living in her dream house. And then the debt collectors start to arrive. They're pounding on the door, demanding money. She has no idea what's going on. Stevens is off at sea, and she said, this must be a mistake. He'll sort it all out when he gets home. More and more creditors start arriving. Stevens keeps dodging and not coming home, and eventually it becomes clear she has not married the man that she thought she had. Not only are they near financial collapse, she discovers that she had accidentally married a pirate. Which is a pretty unexpected discovery, I think, for any young woman at any time, but at this time and place, pretty shocking. He's a very bad pirate, by which I don't mean a morally corrupt, bad person pirate. I mean, he's bad at being a pirate. He is very incompetent at this job. He is a gentleman pirate privateer during the Revolutionary War. He loses ships constantly. He's losing battles constantly. He is losing all of their money and not telling her any of it. Eventually, it gets bad enough she figures out what's going on. But John Stevens promises he's going to fix it. One last voyage. I'm going to take my fleet out on one last voyage, and it will save everything. I'm going to make all the money back. It's going to be fine. This is going to go well, right? He lost all the ships, all of them. And now he owes 5 times what their entire estate is worth. He can't pay any of it. He has literally nothing anymore. He really is a man who seems to mean well. He just cannot do anything right. And so it's by 1784, Judith has blockaded herself in the house. She is sleeping on the key to the house. She won't let anyone in or out of the house because the creditors are all outside and they're literally like banging on the door, trying to break in windows, trying to break into the house. This is a lot. I mean, I think all of us have experienced lockdown. This is a bit more extreme lockdown than most of us experienced. And for years, she is just barricaded in this house because there's nothing that she can do. And she writes some really heartbreaking letters to her brother during this time, just saying, what's the point? What's the point of living? What's the point of carrying on? This life is not what it was supposed to be. I did everything I was supposed to do. I'm tired of this. I've done everything that this life is going to offer me. I can't have children. I don't have any money. My husband has humiliated me in public, and everybody knows not only that he's a pirate, but that he's an incompetent pirate and that he's lost all of our money. And there's no future for me at all. And she is pretty hopeless at this point. So she sits down to write because she can't leave the house and she can't do anything. So she starts writing and writing and writing. If anyone here uses writing as therapy, I definitely do that. I will often write to figure out what I think about something. That's what she's doing. And she is writing, trying to figure out how did I get here? Why am I so helpless? Why am I so dependent on my husband? How is this how our society is operating that I have no chance to impact my own life in any way? I have no financial independence. There is literally nothing that I can do about this situation. This feels obvious to us now. It was not. That she's questioning core fundamentals that most of her society says, God wants it this way. This is the way it has always been. This is the way it will always be. The idea that women's dependence on men is maybe not a social good, maybe not something that's great for society, that maybe this is, in fact, bad for society. That was bold and shocking for her to be saying out loud. But she starts saying this needs to change. Women need to be able to earn money or like own property. Perhaps women shouldn't be seen as property. Like if I get married, I should continue to exist as a legal entity. This is mind-blowing stuff. Now, her father decides to give John Stevens one last chance. He has to do something, right? So Stevens does deed over the house to Judith's father to protect it. So that way no one can take the house because it's not her. He can't deed it to her. She's not a person, but her father's a person and he owns the house, so they can't take the house, but she has literally nothing. So her father gives John Stevens one ship, one more chance. Go, don't pirate, but go deliver some merchandise, be the merchant sailor you were supposed to be, make some money, start to fix this. And he sails off to the Caribbean to solve the problem. She gets packets of letters from him saying, it's going really well, it's working, it's all going to be okay, I'm making money, it's all going to be fine, don't worry, we're going to be okay. And the next letter she gets informs her that he had died, penniless, in a debtor's prison in the Caribbean. She is now, after 18 years of marriage, she's 36 years old, and she has nothing. She has her house, but she has literally nothing else. No way to support herself because she's not allowed to. No access to any sort of resources or help or anything. And so she does what she's always done. She sits down and writes and writes and writes and writes and writes. And she writes on the equality of the sexes, which is a landmark essay laying out in detail how and why women should be equal with men. And here's an original shot of what it looks like, just because it helps me to get visuals. This is the original of On the Equality of the Sexes. It's published in Massachusetts Magazine, which was the premier magazine of the time, which is remarkable in its own. A woman publishing is not a thing that is supposed to be happening. They can write sentimental poetry, but not think pieces. And this is a massive, groundbreaking essay laying out a totally new form of society in which not only do women have legal equality, but social equality, that this whole dichotomous, split down the middle shouldn't be happening. This is the first essay of the sort that has ever been written in the US. This is 2 years before Mary Wollstonecraft writes A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, if anyone is familiar with that, one of my favorite pieces, which, Vindication will sort of turn the Western world upside down with its assertions of feminist women's rights, equality. Judith Sargent Murray is here making these same arguments, these same contentions 2 years earlier in the American colonies. It is a remarkable work in its breadth and its depth. It argues against the gender essentialist differences that were treated as sort of the core fundamental proven facts of society at her time. Men are this way, women are this way. There is no overlap between the categories at any point. And of course, one category, woman, is inherently less than in every way. But Judith knows this is also the age of enlightenment. This is emerging science. People are really interested in nature, in natural law, which means a different thing than it does now, in natural equality. We're barely a decade out of the revolution, which was in theory, at least, about equality, rights of the individual. She knows her audience. She knows her arguments. And while the language is a bit stilted, as 18th century work tends to be, it's also really deeply funny and tongue-in-cheek. And the word I keep coming back to is sassy. For example, she's confronting this established idea that women are universally less intelligent and less competent than men, which was just that's just how it is. She does this very clever thing. She says, okay, we're supposed to understand that nature is balanced and impartial, right? Here's the Enlightenment thinking coming in, that nature will naturally balance out all things, and that all beings are given separate but equal gifts, that everything is balanced out by nature. So she says, okay, so if we're repeatedly told that men are in charge and men are better because they are larger and their better strength and better size proves that God likes them better and wants them in charge, she says, if we are to grant that animal strength proves anything, taking into consideration the impartiality of nature, we should be induced to imagine that she had invested the female mind with superior strength as an equivalent to the bodily powers of man. So she's making a quite shocking argument at the time. Okay, fine. If you're going to insist that men are bigger, then women are smarter. Your own argument says that nature has to balance. And then she does this. But waiving this, however palpable advantage that women have of being smarter, for equality only we wish to contend. It's such a funny, subversive, and very self-aware take to go, oh, no. Using your own arguments, women are smarter and should be in charge, but we won't try to be in charge. We won't try to take over everything. We just want equality. She knows this audience so well. It's so clever. She's forcing them to confront their own thinking that is in conflict with the things they're saying. And she's doing it in this kind of lighthearted, witty way that disarms them, and it makes it really hard to be angry at her. The whole work is like this. It's brilliant. I mean, lots of the arguments now we would look back and go, well, right, clearly we've moved beyond a lot of these arguments, but at the time, they were shocking and they were the most effective way to make this point. So this comes out, she expects it to be a blockbuster, right? Vindication on the Rights of Woman, Mary Wollstonecraft turns things upside down. She's saying the same things, and there's Crickets. Nothing happens. Nobody cares. Apparently, the colonies are not ready for this argument in the way that England is. And she's really frustrated, but she keeps going. She's writing. She's the only way she can support herself is renting rooms in her house and writing. These are the two things she is allowed to do to make income to eat food. So she writes a multi-volume series of books called The Gleaner. These are biographies of remarkable women throughout history, women who stepped in to save the day. And she uses these lives to argue why girls need education. If things get bad enough that women have to take over, those women have to be educated to be able to do that. Obviously, we're not saying women will do that, but in exceptional circumstances, they have to. Again, a frustrating argument now, but at the time, brilliant. And the best way to make this point, because her readers include she has it's a subscription. So you buy the book in advance, right? You buy the book and then they mail it to you. Her subscribers include some mildly important and influential people like George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. She's a huge audience here. And again, should have a huge impact and should be so famous. And yet almost nobody knows her name now. While she's writing these books, her Universalist faith is coming in a lot. And one particular influence is that first Unitarian minister that her family brought over to the colony, Mr. John Murray. John Murray was quite a character on his own. There he is. Love the hair. Kind of like a 18th century mullet thing he's got going there. And John Murray was super famous throughout the US. He is this incredibly charismatic, really dynamic speaker. His insistence on an all-loving, all-forgiving creator is making huge waves, shocking everybody. He served as chaplain to the Rhode Island Regiment under George Washington during the Revolutionary War. And he's a very close friend of the Sargents. And he in fact, was a boarder in Judith and John Stevens' house for many years during their marriage. And after John Stevens' death, he's still boarding in her house. And their relationship becomes much closer. And of course, rumors start flying. This is absolutely unacceptable. He's living in her house and they clearly like each other. And it is a huge scandal. Her brother sends her all kinds of letters saying, I will not allow you to marry John Murray. Again, she's 38 years old, but her brother will not allow her to marry John Murray, forbidding the relationship. She's furious, she's frustrated, he's angry, but she's not going to be stopped. And so the day that her prescribed period of mourning for John Stevens is over, she and John Murray run off to Salem to get married, because that's just far enough. Nobody will know them and nobody will stop them and nobody will hear about it until it's too late. They're married. They are blissfully happy. This is the marriage she has always wanted, a soul connection. She calls it two souls mingling on paper. And she gets pregnant. 38 years old, she is finally pregnant. Her dreams are coming true. But the birth goes very, very badly. She probably had preeclampsia. The baby is stillborn. She nearly dies herself, and she is absolutely devastated by this loss. The baby was going to be named Fitz Winthrop, and she writes some really heartbreaking, moving poetry about this loss and about the difficulty of mourning this loss in a society that doesn't recognize this as something worth mourning. One could be forgiven for giving up hope at this point. She is bedridden for weeks, months. And she does give up hope for a while. So let's talk about hope. Hope is a word that is used for all kinds of concepts and all kinds of reasons. It's often used in bright, shiny, inspirational poster terms. That's not how Judith talks about it. In this poem, after the death of her child, she talks about hope in a really unusual way. That hope had filled her pregnancy. After years of she had given up hope of children, and now hope has filled her pregnancy again and been terribly dashed. And yet, even though she almost died, she would do it again just to grasp that hope again. Not the promise of an alive child, but the hope of an alive child. Hope is an active force in her works. Hope is no flimsy, airy-fairy virtue here. Hope is fierce. Hope is sharp. And it is something that she is actively cultivating and seeking. Hope is a choice that you make. It is the thing that will keep you focused so that you can keep fighting, give you the energy to try again and again and again and again. Refusing to yield to despair sometimes, and coming back again after, even when everything seems utterly hopeless. I would say the most famous poem on hope is Emily Dickinson, right? Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words that never stops at all. And I love me some Emily Dickinson. I am not knocking Emily Dickinson. Let me say out loud, I am not knocking Emily Dickinson here, but I think most of us have experienced at least a few times when hope stopped singing. And most of us have, along with Judith, felt that feeling of hopelessness, that there's nothing we can do to change our situation. There's no point in even trying anymore. And that's why I find Judith so compelling, because she has looked the beast in the face and decided to carry on over and over and over again through soap opera levels. I mean, this is like this much of her life. It is a soap opera level chaos, disaster, tragedy, heartbreak. And she refuses to give in. She almost never wallows in sentimental denial of reality. She knows what reality is. She knows this hope is fragile and often unfulfilled and sometimes pointless feeling, and she does it anyway. That speaks much more to my soul than a lot of the ways hope is talked about. In the very early days of the pandemic, Patrick Nadia-Bolz-Weber taught that, contrary to the toxic positivity crowd, hope is not the starting point. Hope is not the beginning. Hope is at the end, often. Hope is the last man standing after the grittiest of knockdown, drag-out fights. Hope is a survivor, not a poster child. And Judith Sargent Murray definitely agrees. This is from her Invocation to Hope. She's speaking directly to hope as a personified being. And again, 18th century language, so I hope I can make this clear and understandable. So to hope, she says, by thee, the friendless sufferer learns to bear. By thee, the patient heart forgets its woe. Leave me no more, as on that fated morn when my rash soul the impious deed designed, so she has considered ending her life, and when, unconscious of thy blessed return, the foe despair usurped my tortured mind. But come, bright goddess with deceptive smile, with dreams of peace my wearied heart beguile, and sink in fancied bliss the real pain. So here she's saying, even if it's not ever going to happen, I still prefer hope that lets me keep trying than giving up, because nothing changes. When you give up, nothing changes. As long as you hope and you keep trying, something might change. Might not, but it might. That's a hope I can get behind. That's a hope that's a choice, that's determined, sometimes hard to find and sometimes forsaken and refound and lost and found again. A commitment to try, even if it might not be worth it, to try and try and try and rest and maybe contemplate quitting and try again and try again. Maybe that's what Emily Dickinson meant in the first place. The bird keeps singing because it refuses to stop. Because it's only when we stop that it's over. Maybe hope is just a refusal to stop trying to try. Lately, in Judith's words, I hear an echo of a more recent piece of poetry that's been important to me lately from the musical Hadestown. It's a sad tale. It's a tragedy, but we sing it anyway. That's what I aspire to sing it anyway, no matter how bleak things might appear to be, no matter how dark the path might seem, no matter how sure I am that things will not be different this time. Because sometimes, only sometimes, but sometimes they are. Sometimes the baby lives. This is Julia Mariah, who was born 2 years after their loss of Fitz and lived to adulthood Sometimes your essay finds its audience. Sometimes your words matter. Sometimes, even if it's 250 years later, that we are now in a renaissance of Judith Sargent Murray, and feminist scholars and writers and poets are finding her and going, wait, this has been here the whole time. Sometimes these things change the world for the better. That's my kind of hope. Another chance, another try, another hopeful, wild leap into the dark, because we're going to sing it again.